joining us. We don't tend to see it as raw as this.
Good evening and welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Morning Docket. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for watching us. We are covering 2 live trials here on the network, including the trial of Kenosha shooter Kyle Rittenhouse, which is set to begin at 10 a.m. Eastern. But what we're about to start with momentarily is our trial out of Glynn County, Georgia, where 3 defendants are currently facing life without the possibility of parole in the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. Now, for a little background on this case, Arbery was shot and killed by Travis McMichael in February of last year following a struggle while Arbery was out for a reported jog in the McMichael's Brunswick, Georgia neighborhood. McMichael's father, Gregory, told police that he suspected Arbery was behind a string of burglaries in the area and that Arbery, quote, acted like he was armed, which, according to the defendants, led the father and son to follow Arbery that day and attempt to make a citizen's arrest. The 3rd defendant, William Bryan, joined the McMichaels on the pursuit of Arbery that day, and he recorded the entire incident. Now, all 3 defendants face charges including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony, and they have all pleaded not guilty across the board. But really, no one can give us a better look into what is happening in that courthouse and what is happening outside of that courthouse than Law&Crime Daily's own Brian Buckmire, who is on the ground in Glynn County outside the courthouse. Brian, it's good to see you. Let's kind of do a recap of what happened Friday and maybe what we expect to happen today.
Good morning, Jesse. So on Friday, we had opening statements, which we've been waiting for quite some time. The prosecution laid out their case, the theme being assumptions and driveway decisions, saying that that's what the McMichaels as well as Bryan did in this case. They made assumptions of Ahmaud Arbery and made decisions in their driveway to go and chase after him. Now, the defense, they're coming up with an interesting defense here. Travis McMichael's defense attorney, Bob Rubin, started off opening statements and said basically that he had a duty and responsibility both to his children as well as the community. It's interesting to see how he led with his opening statement because for many defense attorneys, whether or not your client is going to testify is a secret all the way up until the end. But for me, as a defense attorney looking at his opening statements, I was curious to see how much of Travis McMichael's own mind state at the time was brought into opening statements. For example, the defense attorney said that when Ahmaud Arbery was 20 yards away from him when they finally stopped him and he raised that 12-gauge pump-action Remington shotgun, that Travis McMichael thought of his then 3-year-old son at the time and thought that he was going to die. I find that interesting because there's only one way for that testimony to come in, and that's for Travis McMichael to testify. We'll have to wait and see if that actually happens, though. Then Gregory McMichael's defense attorney, Frank Hogue, started his opening statements, co-signing much of what Travis McMichael's defense attorney said, but also interjecting this theory that both the McMichaels are saying that on February 7th, they actually bumped into Ahmaud Arbery at the scene and that Ahmaud Arbery reached for his left pocket, making them believe that this was an individual that was armed even some days later, and that's why they chased him with guns. It's unsure whether or not that's going to give them the probable cause to enact the citizen's arrest, believing that he had a gun some days before without actually having any evidence of it, or even saying that, as many officers would say, there's a bulge or an L-shaped object. So just reaching for your pocket is a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see how that played out. But one of the more exciting things in the opening statement was that William Bryan's defense attorney, Kevin Goff, preserved or waived temporarily his opening statements until after the prosecution's case. Now, during the opening statement for the prosecution and the defense, part of that video, that infamous video we saw that kind of sparked this whole trial, was played, and Wanda Cooper Jones let out multiple deep cries and sighs. As she said, this was the first time that she saw the video in its entirety, and it was painful for her. Marcus Arbery, Ahmaud Arbery's father, also stepped out of the courtroom from time to time because it seemed to be a very painful moment for the family.
Yeah, and you're referring, of course, to the body cam footage that was incredibly graphic of where you actually see Ahmaud Arbery bleeding and dead. I have to tell you, covered a number of cases here. That was probably one of the worst videos I've ever seen. I do want to ask you about witnesses today. So the prosecution started off very strong with that body cam footage. I think it sent a pretty powerful message to this jury about what this case is going to be about. Who are you looking out for today for the prosecution?
So the first, as you said, witness that testified was what we call a responding officer, the first officer on the scene who was actually just there moments after the shooting. And we did see very graphic, extremely graphic video. I can tell you, I've done a few homicides myself. I've never seen as graphic as video as this played to a jury. They're going to start with that and then work their way back. I believe they're going to try to contest some of the arguments that The community was on edge because of a spur of petty thefts, because there were no arrests, and also break-ins at Larry English's home. Now, Larry English is the individual who owned that construction site at the time. He's not going to come in and testify because of his health and transporting him here, but they have agreed to allow for his deposition to come in, and so they're going to play that, and I think we're going to get more of a background as to what we're hearing and seeing in this case. For the defense, they are pointing at the fact that Gregory McMichael was right in that the person who was in Larry English's home on at least 4 other occasions was Ahmaud Arbery. But the prosecution has a strong argument in saying Larry English himself has said that Ahmaud Arbery never committed any crime other than trespass, and without any trespass signs or any gates to keep them out, the question is, was there actually a trespass? And the defense and prosecution obviously going to argue that point.
So, Brian, I do want to ask you one last thing. It was a shocker to me that William Goff, who's been very, how should I say this, vocal throughout this case, he's been very interesting to follow, chose not to move forward with an opening statement, as you said, waiving it for a later time. What was the reaction to that? I mean, because I can't be the only one who was surprised by it.
So, Jesse, the judge was so surprised that he actually had to go back into chambers, check the rule books, and see if this was even allowed. Now, prosecutors for at least most states, I only practice in New York and obviously study up when I come to other states, but in Georgia, it's the same thing in New York. Prosecutors have to give opening statements. The defense can choose whether or not they want to give their opening statement or give their opening statements at the beginning of their case in chief, meaning after the prosecution gives opening statements. Again, the judge was so shocked he had to go back, talk to his clerk, see whether or not this was allowed. But Kevin Goff used to be the chief public defender here in Glenn County, Georgia, and so obviously he's very familiar with this concept. I think it kind of made sense. This is not something I would recommend to most young defense attorneys, but when you already have 2 defense attorneys give an opening statement, I don't think Kevin Goff was going to add too much there. So I think he's going to lay in wait and see what the prosecution has and kind of get 2 bites at the apple. One for an opening statement before he puts on a case, and then close the arguments after that.
All right, well, we're going to wait and see what happens with, really day 2 of the trial. I know jury selection, but really day 2 of the substantive portion of this trial. Brian Buckmire, always going to be reporting back to us on what is happening inside that courthouse and as well as outside. Brian, thanks so much.
It was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight. The 3 men charged will now stand trial. For live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the trial, subscribe to Law&Crime on YouTube TV today.